Inflation is not bad. I'm sorry if you don't like me saying it, but this is just the truth. Hey guys, this is Seth, and this is all you need to know about inflation to understand it. Inflation is the general increase in the prices in the place you live in. This is like summing up all the prices of the goods and services. In Canada, inflation is calculated by putting all the consumer goods into one basket and measure the increase in the prices over the years. There are 8 major components of all the products that are used in the basket. That's food, shelter, household operations like furnishing and equipment, clothing and footwear, transportation, health and personal care, recreation, education and reading, and alcoholic beverages, tobacco, and other cannabis products. This basket is used to calculate consumer price index, which is used to calculate inflation. There is inflation and there is core inflation. The Bank of Canada or central bank is concerned with core inflation. The core inflation does not include the items with very volatile prices. If you're wondering what are the items that are used to calculate core inflation, here is the list of 55 items that Bank of Canada used to calculate core inflation. Now, what type of inflations are there? There are 2 types of inflations: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation occurs when income rises, wages increase. People have more money to spend on the goods and services. It really does not matter where the money people get from. As long as there is more money in the economy, the demand of the products and services would go up. This actually happened during COVID-19 when governments started paying emergency response benefits to people who were losing jobs. In fact, extra money was given to the people who used that money to buy the same products that they usually buy, and they bought more. The demand pull inflation kicked in. And this was common nearly in every country all around the world during COVID. In Canada, inflation went up to 8.1% in June 2022. This inflation can be made worse by low taxes and government spendings. To treat this kind of inflation, income of the people need to be lowered. This was the reason that Governor of Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, went to Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses and told them not to increase the wages of the workers. It was like he telling them, I am trying to control inflation here, and if you keep paying people higher wages, I'm gonna have pretty hard time doing my job. The other way to treat this inflation is increasing the incentive for the people to save in bank accounts. This happened 2 years ago when banks started offering higher rate of interest or profit on the saving accounts. Now in 2024, we don't see that many products offered by the bank that would promote saving. That means this is because inflation is quite controlled at the moment. Cost push inflation occurs when input costs like raw material, labor, energy, capital goes up. Workers are demanding for higher wages. Electricity or gas bills are going through the roof, and the capital is available on higher interest rates. Cost push inflation is quite more destructive inflation because people start losing jobs and the real GDP decreases. When people don't go to work, workers are not working to produce those goods that are in shortage, and because they are in shortage, their price go up. This leads to wage price spiral. When the wages are going up and prices of the goods and services are also going up. The problem with cost pull inflation is it cannot be controlled by central bank. Even governments cannot do much. It has to correct itself. When the real GDP comes down a lot and people don't find any work, they return to work on lower wages, and the cost of the producers and the manufacturers come down. So cost push inflation is self-limiting. Some inflation is good all over the world, and in every economics book, all the experts are agreed upon 2% inflation is good for the economy. Yikes, you're saying inflation is good? My salary is fixed. Every month inflation increases the prices, but my salary stays the same. How is inflation good? Nobody says inflation is good. Why do you say inflation is good? Yes, that's right. But inflation is good for the economy. Inflation is not good for the individuals. Individuals must look for other ways to make money. But when there is inflation in the economy, people think that in future the prices are going to be higher. Their belief that the price will increase make them to buy the products in the present. In other words, if people think that the prices are going to be the same or prices are going to reduce in the future, they will tend to buy in the future. This is the rationale behind all the governments all around the world and the central banks all around the world, that 2% inflation will boost up the demand, which in turn will expand the economy, and every country wants to grow its economy. At 2% inflation, the prices are relatively stable. They grow slowly, doubling every 36 years. That means that if you buy 1 liter of milk at $1 today, you'll be able to buy that 1 liter milk for $2 after 36 years if there is consistent 2% inflation year over year. Inflation can be bad. In fact, it can be worse. If inflation goes beyond 100% in a year, it becomes hyperinflation. There have been countries who have seen hyperinflation. The examples are Venezuela, Lebanon, and Argentina. In those countries, the basic need items are scarce. There are people who are making money and their money is significantly reduced in value. The elections are won or lost on the issue of inflation. But the countries and the governments who can control inflation well enough, the people in their countries don't see their wealth erode. The basic need items are rarely in shortage. High inflation is not bad for everyone. There are some people who get the benefit out of high inflation. For example, borrowers. When borrowers borrow funds from banks or somewhere, they pay fixed interest on it. But when the inflation increases more than expected, their cost of funds reduces in value. That means that they are enjoying the funds at lower prices. High inflation is also good for manufacturing companies, for producers, because the wages are stable and the prices of the goods and services they produce, it goes up during inflation. So their profit margin is quite high. This was the reason that last year Loblaw's CEO was in the news because he earned extra $1.2 million when Canadians were struggling to pay for their groceries. It is pretty obvious too that inflation is bad for wider population. People with limited income, people with low income, people who are earning in cash. Retirees are also affected by high inflation. Savings are rendered worthless during the time of high inflation. The central bank makes monetary policy, government makes fiscal policy. Both of these policies affect inflation in the economy. But in countries like Canada and US, where central bank is independent, they are the only players in this game of controlling inflation. The central bank controls inflation by target policy interest rate. This target policy interest rate is for the other banks. Of course, the borrowers do not approach the central banks. They go to the smaller banks. The banks get money from central bank on those rates. So when the policy rate goes up, the banks pass on that cost to the borrowers, and the borrowers are less likely to borrow funds on high prices. The result is the money supply is reduced in the economy. So when the inflation goes up, the central bank increases the interest rate. When the inflation rate goes down, the central bank reduces its interest rate. But the central bank can only play this game as long as the rate is above 0%. They can effectively control the inflation by increasing the interest rate that has no cap on it. But when the inflation starts going down and enters into negative territory, it becomes deflation. When the general price level is decreasing, people are delaying their purchases in order to get better deals in the future. Producers stop their productions because nobody is buying their product. Production comes to a halt, unemployment goes up. This reinforces deflation. Economy gets worse and worse because central bank cannot reduce interest rate below 0%. You cannot pay someone money to take money from you, right? So the government steps in. It's been happening in Japan for quite some years. They are attracting global investors to come and invest in Japan and increase the money supply and bring the inflation out of negative territory, and the economy grows. Similar things are happening in China, where there are deflationary pressures and they are giving money to the people to buy products. They are even injecting funds in the stock market so that they could get to that 2% inflation rate, the magic number 2%. Inflation is good. Like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.